You've already read the title, so let's not beat around the bush and get right into the challenge. Is it possible to beat Sekiro Shadows Die Twice without getting detected? First off, we gotta get through some rules. First rule is, no getting detected. This is pretty obvious, but when do we know if we actually got detected? I count getting detected by the yellow triangle above enemies' heads turning red. If the triangle stays yellow and the enemies just get suspicious and start Scooby-Dooing around, it's completely fine. And if I accidentally get spotted by an enemy, I have to immediately stop making progress and homeward idle to my last idle. There's also a sound cue that follows the red triangle, which can be used for uncertain scenarios. An exception to this rule of friendly NPCs. That means talking to the sculpture and using any shops, etc. are allowed, indicated by them not having any form of detection meter. A bigger exception is the exception that getting spotted by an unintelligent animal does not count as getting detected. This challenge run tries to simulate Sekiro as a mystique, silent ninja no one knows exists. Getting spotted by a random cricket in the overworld would never let the different clans in Sekiro know of Wolf's existence. I use the term unintelligent animal, but what do I mean by that? I mean that getting spotted by ninja dogs, ninja monkeys, and other humanoid creatures such as the Meepo villagers, zombies, and fountainhead people does count. As I see it, the dogs and monkeys are trained, and it wouldn't be too far-fetched to think that they can relay information and therefore ruin the challenge of Wolf staying completely hidden. So for a more robust rule set, the unintelligent animals of this run are the fish, crickets, and geckos. It is allowed to stealth kill enemies or have them die in other ways as long as you don't get detected, but bonus points for leaving them alive. Tying into the scenario from earlier, the less deaths, the more of a myth Wolf will be. Second rule is regarding bosses. All mandatory bosses are allowed to be killed, as the game of course would not be possible without beating the last boss, for example. No cheese or loops on bosses, except if it is to help comply with the first rule of Wolf staying hidden. Mini-bosses are only allowed to be killed if they are connected to a smoke wall, which hinders the progress of the game. Although, you have to stealth death below the first health bar. Third rule, no prayer necklaces or gourd seeds, and the game must be started as a new game, not New Game Plus. We don't want to have stealth skills leveled up beforehand, and access to mountain echo and other prosthetics, or basically unlimited items and sugars. Fourth rule, glitches are allowed, but no sequence breaks, like for example air swimming directly to Fountainhead. And last, no Shura for this run. We have to beat the game using the divine Severance ending. I think that pretty much covers it all, so without much further ado, let's get into the run. The tutorial is pretty simple. The first half of the tutorial is actually meant to be a stealth section, since you don't have your sword yet, so we don't even need to get clever for this part. Simply follow the intended path and just don't rush through the middle. After we've gotten to Kuro and gotten our sword, it's actually best to go out the same hole we came in and just follow the cliffside back towards the house. We need to jump up here, but be a little careful. There's a slight chance that we get instantly spotted by one of the samurais, and that'll force us to homeward idle away. After going under the house, we can simply stealth past the samurai by using the tall grass next to the house. We can eventually jump down and around the remaining samurai to enter the tutorial mini-boss fight. Proceeding into the tutorial mini-boss fight, this guy's actually the easiest mini-boss in it. Like I said, this guy's easy, so I smoothly quickly finish him up and continue towards the secret passage. I take the route shown here to avoid dealing with the rat standing up under the bridge. Then I chose to beat tutorial Genichiro for the memes before getting my arm chopped off and starting both the game and the run off for good. Now that the run actually starts off, I make sure that when Wolf wakes up, he instantly runs out without asking the sculpture when and where he is, to show him who's the alpha, Wolf. I run straight for the first idol. Instead of killing the enemies located throughout the outskirts, I take an elevated path to avoid most of them and sneak around the rest. This might be a good time to talk about grappling. When using the grappling hook, you might be surprised by how little sound it makes to enemies compared with what we hear. Also, enemies really don't see grappling that well. This actually makes grappling a lot of the time more sneaky than just jumping or climbing. I then pick up the shuriken prosthetic for later before grabbing another idol. I then take a left path where I jump off the cliff and grapple back on, instead of taking the right path since it's filled with samurai, including the first mini-boss, which even if I wanted to kill, I'm not allowed to kill because he's not tied to a smoke wall. I grab the Gachian sugars as seen here, as these are very valuable. They make it harder for the enemies to detect Wolf so that he can sneak past otherwise impossible scenarios. But we can't abuse these sugars, as they are a consumable and there are only a limited amount of them in the overworld. They can be a rare enemy drop by killing certain enemies, but seen as one of my bonus point rules were to limit killing, I chose not to do this at all through the entire run. I then make it to Ogre. He's the first mandatory mini-boss if you're excluding glitches, since he is tied to a smoke wall. There are two samurai standing before Ogre, which we need to sneak past, because killing one of them would instantly alert the other. They can be very hard to sneak past if you don't use a Gachian. And since I also need to stealth death blow the first health bar of Ogre for the challenge, I decided to use a Gachian. I believe it may be technically possible to sneak past the samurai and stealth death blow the Ogre without getting detected, but then you are also even more at risk of getting caught by the samurai while fighting Ogre. While fighting the Ogre, I showed my immense talent by getting hit not once, but twice by the Ogre, causing me to die, then causing the Gachian to wear off, and that causing me to almost get caught by the samurai after killing Ogre. I swear I'm good at this game, guys. I do a little mild parkour in order to grab some more Gachian sugars. This way I don't have to go through the cave with Headless in order to get to them. In this next area, I first tried sneaking around the left side, but this proved more troublesome than I first imagined. These guards are just placed very well in order to cover each other's blind spots, and most of them don't really move around. I eventually tried to make a move, but ended up getting caught. The reason I first tried to sneak around the left side instead of going by the right side, which is more intuitive, is because there's a gunner located with extremely good vision who often catches you on a whim, especially when you have no stealth skills leveled up. I found a way to get past the first two samurai near Ogre without having to use Gachian. I did this by jumping on the tree, then down and breaking the torch behind them. This causes them to hear the sound of the torch, and then they turn around to investigate the noise. Then I can jump behind them and run past them, as they are no longer looking the correct way. The way I eventually ended up getting through this area was by using the right side paired with another Gachian sugar. The Gachian sugar makes it so that the gunner doesn't spot you while going through the right side, and after you've gotten through the gunner, the right side is actually pretty barren. This makes it pretty easy to just hog the right side all the way around until you can jump down to the next idol. Coming up to the snake, I was a little uncertain on how I would actually tackle this obstacle. On the one hand, the snake is actually meant to be played as a stealth section, so we have an intended path laid out for us where we don't get spotted. What I was scared of potentially proving an obstacle for this run was the part where we need to stab the snake in the eye. I thought there's no way that we could actually get out and stab him in the eye without him detecting us. But what was really surprising is that if we play by the rules that we laid out in the beginning of this video, the snake actually doesn't spot you while stabbing him in the eye. I mean, I was surprised by this too. But I mean, look at this. This right here does not count as getting detected. We have no red triangle and we have no sound. It gets stabbed in the eye and it just goes apeshit. After grabbing the idol, I went over to grab an Akko sugar for use shortly later. By the way, don't get tempted by the rat standing on the cliffside by the idol. He looks harmless, but homie has like the Byakugan or something. I wanted to get up here and get under the house to steal some money for use later, but in order to do this I ended up killing 2 samurai. This is something that I actually didn't need to do. I could easily just backed up and went back to the idol, then grappled on top of the buildings and went behind them. Then I could probably still have stolen the money without killing anyone. Here coming up on Gerudo, he's the first mandatory boss of this run, so the rule set doesn't apply to him and we just kill him normally. I used the Akko sugar for the second phase of this boss fight just to speed it up a little. The only thing a little sad is the fact that we're not allowed to cheese or loop any bosses. This means that we can't watch Gerudo run off the edge like an idiot. After defeating Gerudo, I went over to the shop next to the building with Tengu inside. Here, I sell the coin purse that I picked up earlier from under the house. I use this to buy the firecrackers. After purchasing the firecrackers, I go in to talk to Tengu to make him appear at Ashina Castle. Tengu offers us to help him hunt rats in exchange for a skill book. Simply because we don't really need any of the skills from that skill book and we want to limit killing, I just refused the quest. But we still needed to talk to him and refuse his quest in order for him to appear at Ashina Castle later. I simply grapple around the cliffside to the left to avoid a big bulk of enemies on the right path. I jump over here to grab some more Akko sugar, but instead of continuing this path, I jump back and take a different one. If you remember not to jump into the tree like an idiot, then this passage makes it really easy to get through this area undetected. Now that we're getting to the bowl, it's actually gonna get pretty interesting. We have to decide if it's even allowed to kill the bull. The bull is recognized as a mini-boss, and we laid out in the beginning of the rule set that mini-bosses are only allowed to be killed if they are tied to a smoke wall. The bull is not tied to a smoke wall, but is in much of the same manner tied to another wall, mainly the gate keeping us out of Ashina Castle. But on the other hand, the bull is not allowed to be stealth death-blown in a way. I mean, with glitches, it is possible to stealth startle the bull, which means the posture gets broken and you can kill it instantly. But this would involve cheesing a boss, and we are not allowed to do that. I said in the beginning that unintelligent animal enemies were not counted by the rules. But what about animal bosses? I mean, is the bull an intelligent animal? Unintelligent animal? I mean, this is up for debate. If you are under the impression that the bull is not allowed to be killed under the given circumstances, then I propose a solution for you. We just cheat! I mean, I just told you that we can glitch stealth kill the bull in much the same manner we can just skip the bull entirely. It's a very well known out of bounds trick that you can jump off the tree and get around on top of the bull arena and simply walk around it. But I thought it would be much more fun and much more interesting to see how we can kill the bull if we say we're allowed to kill it, because the bull arena is literally filled with enemies. And these are not allowed to spot us under any circumstances. The Bull's arena houses 3 enemies. The first enemy we can take out by stealth killing, but we can use the Bull to our advantage on the second 2. By walking into the range of activating the Bull, then quickly walking back without the enemies detecting us, we can make the Bull ram into the enemies, killing them for us without them ever spotting us. This doesn't break any rules, since we said at the start of the run that enemies dying in any way is allowed as long as you don't get detected. But this is not the most interesting part. The most interesting part is what we do after killing the Bull. Once you kill the Bull, normally 2 samurai will open the door behind the Bull, and then they'll instantly spot Sekiro no matter where he is in the arena. But by using our homeward idol almost immediately, we can counter this in 2 ways. The first way is just to abuse how the game sets checkpoints. We've already defeated the Bull. That means when we use our homeward idol, it will not put us at the idol before the Bull, but actually put us at the idol after the Bull to avoid a potential soft lock. It might be potentially possible to use the homeward idol and teleport away before the enemies even spot Wolf, but I was unable to manage this, and since you really only have 1 try, I just went with the first option. Our first objective is to get to the top of Ashina Castle in order to beat Genichiro. But while climbing Ashina Castle, I ran into a roadblock. Although Ashina Castle can be scaled in many different ways, at one point you have to make it over this gap. The problem with this gap is that these Nightjar ninjas are way too good at their job. I tried different options and different strategies, but this just seemed like completely impossible to get over. I did, however, come up with one strategy to get over this pitfall. However, it requires a completely different approach. Normally, you make it to the top of Ashina Castle, fight Genichiro, and talk to Kuro. Kuro then tells you that you need to find 3 different objects in 3 different sections of the map. Those sections being the Sunken Valley, the Miibo Village, and the Senpu Temple. It is, however, possible that you can grab and obtain certain items and adventure into these sections before beating Genichiro. We'll be using this to our advantage. Remember the cheating from before? Yeah, we'll be needing that again. But this time, we need a new technique. This sets our scope for the Miibo Village. In order to get to Miibo Village, we first have to get through Ashina Reservoir. Ashina Reservoir is actually relatively easy to get through if you just take the path as shown here and stay close to the edges. It's also here you first encounter homeboy Jinza or whatever. I just chose to ignore him. First off, because it ties into the challenge very well. Second off, we can't even finish his quest in this challenge. We then have to kill our first lone shadow. This guy is in the form of a mini-boss, but luckily he's tied to a smoke wall, and we can still deathblow his first phase. So he's fair game for this challenge. After defeating the lone shadow, it's just a straight shot down to the depths. As long as you just follow the path, there's only really one enemy that can detect you, and that being a zombie. But you can easily just jump past this zombie before he spawns to avoid him altogether. Then we just go down and first pick up the idol at the Ashina depths. Afterwards, we can grapple our way across and take another idol at the poison pool. This is another fine example that grappling is actually really stealthy in this game for some reason. Now we have to defeat another mini-boss, Snake Eyes. Again, Snake Eyes is tied to a smoke wall and is stealthable first health bar. This means fair game. The only real strategy I use is that I lure her down towards the smoke wall. This makes it so that her minions and other gunners around the poison pool can't detect me while I fight her. Also, Snake Eyes has one of those rare grabs where you can actually deflect the grab. Since we haven't done anything with Abe yet, the path towards the hidden forest is completely clear. In the hidden forest, I take this path towards Mist Noble, where I can pick up some Yashirigos and some snap seeds for later. This path is also good to avoid many of the chickens around the hidden forest. The chickens are really the only threat around here, since the ghosts around here don't really bother you until you bother them. They're kinda weird in that way. By doing this little jump here on top of the tree and then to on top of the house, it completely skips the path with the drunkard that is normally necessary to get up here. We have to kill Mist Noble in order to get rid of the smoke wall behind the mist. We just actually have to make sure that we successfully stealth deathblow his first health bar in order to make him a legal kill. Now that we've actually made it to Meepo Village, things get a little trickier. Meepo Village has a lot of villagers, and these make it very difficult to traverse the village. They have both stationary villagers which stand around houses and near the lake, but they also have these big crowds of villagers moving through the village. The only real strategy is that almost all of the villagers are located on ground level. This means that verticality is gonna be our friend. But after a lot of trial and error, I found a really good path through the village, although be a very twisted one. I have to wait for this bulk of villagers to move through. I jump from house to house to avoid ground level. Be careful, there's a chicken located on this roof and he can easily spot you. There's actually a lady under this house who will spot you if you don't know she's there. We have to take this left path, because just walking on the ground of the main path will instantly get you spotted by underground villagers. Instead of going through this building, it's better to get above it. By taking this path, we both avoid the villagers inside the house and in front of the house. We can then jump into the water and go grab the idol from the other side. Another important thing to note is that in order for us to actually progress, we have to take the way through the water canal. If we just take the main path, it's impossible to get past Orin without her aggroing us. Coming up on Monk, we're gonna be needing a few items. We're gonna be needing at least 3 snap seeds and 4 ash. Although possible with 4 ash, I would recommend getting around 7. If you don't have enough, you can either buy some in the shop close to the Ashina Castle Gate idol, or you can substitute the ash for firecrackers. We're gonna be needing these materials to cheese the monk. I know, I've always said that we're not allowed to cheese bosses, but this falls under the exception. This cheese will help us comply with the first rule of wolf staying hidden. You'll see. First off, I hug the left wall into the arena. This delays the spawn of the monk. I run in behind the monk as it spawns. Then I use 3 snap seeds followed by 7 ash. This will push the monk back, enabling me to jump on one of the stones behind me and getting a stealth deathblow on the monk without it ever seeing us. This makes Monk a clean, silent assassination. For defeating the monk, we're rewarded with our hidden technique, the Meepo breathing technique. This is what we're gonna use to get on top of Shina Castle to defeat Genichiro. While we're already here, I grab the shelter stone before heading back. I make a quick pit stop at the dilapidated temple. Here I talk to the sculptor to receive my first skill book and also for him to fit the 2 prosthetics I picked up along the way. After teleporting back to the Ashina Castle idol, we're gonna be heading for the bridge that leads into the abandoned dungeon, but we are not gonna cross it. Instead, we're gonna be making a right turn to jump on top of this tiled roof. From here, we're gonna perform what is known as a delayed jump off the tiled roof into the wall. The delayed jump is required to give us the extra distance in order to make it into the part where the wall is not solid. We then jump into the water located out of bounds. From here, we can use the Meepo breathing technique to activate a glitch called air swimming. I have to be careful as I'm air swimming not to touch any death barriers that would instantly kill me. As I air swim inbounds again, I can now make my way to Ashina Castle. This time I just have to make sure that I air swim high enough that the Nightjar ninjas don't spot me. As you're air swimming, your actions are severely limited. It's not possible to commune with any idols or interact with certain objects. Luckily, the Genichiro fight is guarded by a cutscene trigger. After entering and exiting this cutscene trigger, we're grounded again with all actions available to us. Funnily enough, entering this cutscene from an air swimming state makes it so some of the sound effects are messed up, like for example having extra reverb on them. The air swimming sound effects are also persistent throughout the actual fight with Genichiro. But apart from the sound effects, this fight is fought exactly as you would in a normal playthrough. And with us finally slaying Genichiro marks the end of chapter 3. After defeating Genichiro, we are able to advance the plot. First, we start off talking to Kuro, then we head over to Ishin's room to talk to him also. As you remember from earlier, the plot now requires us to find 3 items. One of which we've already located and picked up, being the Shelter Stone after defeating the corrupted monk. This now leaves us with the 2 remaining items, that being the Mortal Blade located in Senpu Temple and the Flower located in Sunken Valley. For this run, we have to start by going to Senpu Temple for reasons you'll see later, but right now it sets our mark for Senpu Temple. To get to Senpu Temple, we have to head through the abandoned dungeon. The abandoned dungeon in itself is really tricky, but before we can even get into the abandoned dungeon, we have to cross this bridge. I mean, this bridge is just really tricky. It's so barren that they don't give you a lot of options to try to sneak past these guards, and the brute force method just doesn't work. And I just don't think it's possible to try to cross the bridge by going under the bridge and then jumping back up. It just looks like the devs made it impossible to jump back up. Luckily, you can just make this section extremely trivial by just using a gatchin. This next section is actually really funny. I mean, I didn't know if it was possible to cross this section without alerting the dogs, but I just thought, what happens if I just kill him? The dogs are so low HP, they die to a single shuriken, so I just equipped the shuriken prosthetic and started sniping off the dogs one by one. And I mean, the big guy or the other dogs don't get alerted by this, they just get suspicious, and then they start investigating, but after like 5 seconds the big guy just thinks, huh? Must be COVID or something. And just returns to his normal sitting position, which makes this section extremely easy to sneak past. Now coming up on the actual abandoned dungeon, it gets a bit tricky. We encounter our first roadblock right at the beginning. There's a zombie right at the entrance to the abandoned dungeon. This zombie is actually quite difficult, because no matter what we do, it's impossible to sneak past him. The way he works is that by us going a set distance into the abandoned dungeon will trigger him to stand up and then try to look for us. And it doesn't matter how silent we traverse this path or how fast we traverse this path, no matter what, he'll still stand up and just spot us. This means we have to take him out, but actually killing zombies in this challenge run is very difficult. This is because you have to deathblow these zombies twice. They almost have 2 life bars in a way, because after you kill them the first time, they'll revive, and then you have to kill them a second time for them to actually die. so we actually need to get a little bit clever in order for us to make sure that we can kill the zombie in one death blow. The way we do this is by using the ninjutsu we got from Genichiro. Killing Genichiro gives us the blood smoke ninjutsu. This ninjutsu can be activated after a backstab death blow and can be used to make a blood smoke cloud. We're not very interested in the smoke cloud itself, but the way this works is by transforming the zombie into the blood smoke cloud will actually make the zombie die instantly. This allows us to kill the zombie in the first death blow, which means we can kill it before it detects us. After this, we simply take the bottom path towards the first idol in the abandoned dungeon to avoid the remaining zombies. The latter half of the abandoned dungeon is also tricky, but it's incredibly convenient that for us that we've already gone to Miibu village and unlocked the Miibu breathing technique. Going under the water makes this section much easier to traverse undetected. The first group of enemies are completely skipped by just going under the water, but for us to actually make it to the elevator that takes us to Senpu Temple, we have to make it past these two guards. It's pretty easy to stealth kill the first guard from the ledge and take him out silently that way, but the other guard is a bit more tricky. The other guard is blocking the passageway, so we have to move him somehow. I wanted to make him suspicious in order for him to go investigate something he found suspicious. But as you can see, this guard instantly spots me when I try to make him suspicious. He completely skips the suspicious states and spots me immediately. But when I wanted to make a second attempt, something interesting happened. The first guard got suspicious without noticing me, and I reckoned it must be something to do with the fish. This will make a very interesting strategy. Since we're allowed to get spotted by the fish, if we can somehow manage to take out the first guard and then use the fish to rattle around making so much noise that we get the second guard suspicious, maybe he will come to take a look. So that's what I tried until eventually it actually worked. And he moved down to check the fish. By that time I could jump behind him and walk right up into the elevator. Now that we've made it to Senpu, things are still not gonna be easy. The paths at Senpu are filled with monks, making it very difficult to traverse certain paths. These monks also travel in groups, which makes it not feasible to try to kill them. Therefore, I instead took advantage of the terrain. Senpu Temple is located in this kind of forest area, which means there's a lot of tall grass. I used this tall grass to sneak past a lot of the monks. It took some attempts, but I eventually found a good way through this first section. I simply just hug the right cliffside and jump around possible interferences. Once we've made it inside the cricket room, it's a pretty straight shot through the building if we just take out one monk. After getting through the building, we make it to the last section before the idol, although this is also the hardest section. We have to make it to this grapple point, but the grapple point is being blocked by these Nachinata monks. At first glance, it may seem intuitive to take the left side around. But when taking the left side, you have to deal with some of these annoying archers and other samurai who seem to have eagle vision. It just seemed impossible to be able to jump up without getting spotted. Therefore, I concluded that to get past this section, I had to take the right side around. Taking the right side around eventually leaves you with one Nachinanta ninja as the main problem to get past. Namely, this guy. However, after different attempts, I came forward with a solution where I would use the general strategy I first tried to use in the abandoned dungeon. I'd here use myself as bait to get the monk suspicious but not alert him all the way. When he came to investigate, I would then jump behind him and proceed through the area. And in this case, it worked and I was able to get behind him without alerting anyone, and then I could jump to the grapple point. From here is a straight shot to the next idol. In this next area, we have to get up through this cliffside. This cliffside is a little different because rather than having the ordinary monks we saw earlier, it's instead filled with rats. It's impossible to take the grapple point up without getting instantly spotted. This makes it so we have to get through this cave. I couldn't find a good solution to get past this area without killing anyone, so I instead decided to commit mass genocide and just kill every single rat. To do this, I had to take them out one by one. This is where we encounter the first rat we had to take out. The first rat is actually located above the exit of the cave. You can only see his shadow. You have to walk towards the exit to trigger him to jump down, then quickly walk back in order for him not to spot you. Then you can take him out by a silent backstab. After this, we can grapple over to this lone island. We have to instantly crouch in order for this rat not to spot us. Then we can take him out also. Then we can quickly grapple up to this tree branch. From this tree branch we can jump and grab the ledge. From here on out we can simply perform a stealth death blow from the ledge. After taking out the final rat, we can climb the rest of the cliffside. Now we have another debate on whether or not it's okay to kill the armored warrior. The armored warrior is another mini-boss that is connected to a smoke wall. The main problem is that it is impossible to stealth death blow the armored warrior, mainly because he doesn't have any life bars, since he doesn't take any damage. It's impossible to kill him with an ordinary death blow. You have to make him fall off the ledge after breaking his posture. If you so wish to do so, there is a major skip that you can perform in this area in older versions of Sekiro, where you're able to jump straight into the monkey boss fight, skipping the rest of the Senpou temple entirely. But I find it way more interesting if we just allow ourselves to kill the armored warrior, since he doesn't have death blows to begin with in a certain sense. Now we've made it to the final area of Senpou, although this is also the hardest. There's a really large amount of monks, rats and ninja dogs in this area, and they all cover each other's backs. I banged my head against the wall for a long time trying to get through this section. I tried different possibilities, different ways and different paths, until I found a pathway and strategy that worked most of the time, while still being very hard. The final strategy I ended up using resolves around jumping down the right cliffside. Here I have to take out the two ninja dogs. The most reliable way to do this is by jumping down and stealth killing the first ninja dog before throwing a shuriken, instantly killing the other ninja dog. This makes certain that the dog doesn't detect you, and also that other enemies don't hear the dog, suspecting them. After this I can then grapple around the right cliff side of the temple grounds. This makes sure that the enemies in the main area doesn't spot you. Following the right side we can then jump up, running right around the temple. I from here perform a jump around to the tree to make the grapple point appear so I can grapple on top of the building. At top of the temple I sneak around the back, making sure the rat doesn't detect me. From here I can perform two more grapples, instantly scaling the entire mountain fast. From this rooftop I grapple to the tree branch to tackle this next very irritating section. I have to get past these two guards, one of which are roaming up and down the stairs, the other one standing at top of them. The roaming monk is pretty easy to deal with. You simply wait for him to walk down the steps to make sure he isn't in the pathway. The other monk is really annoying. My strategy was just to simply jump behind him and then proceed normally. The problematic part is that sometimes he can easily hear me jumping behind them, then turn suspicious to turn around and detect me. This is mainly due to me not having enough stealth skills leveled up at this point in the game. The problem with him turning suspicious is that I instantly have to go to this wall and hug it, because the moment I jump down I trigger this monk to walk towards me, and if I don't kill him he will then detect me. By having the other monk suspicious, he will then detect me before I have enough time to stealth kill the first monk. If I make it past that section, I have to make sure that I don't run straight ahead and get detected by the Nachinata monks. Instead I simply crouch and take the path around left. From here I grapple to the next area. I have to watch out for the Nachinata monks because they have incredibly great vision. I need to jump and grapple around them again, but I have to wait because I have now triggered another Nachinata monk that will walk this way. I have to wait for the roaming Nachinata monk to walk all the way down and then all the way back before proceeding. If I make the grapple without being detected, I then can walk towards this wall, hug it and stealth kill this Nachinata monk in much of the same fashion as the other monk. From here I can finally crouch and simply sneak my way towards the next idol, finally completing this section. From here on out, the rest of Senpou Temple is complete cake. I just head straight into the folding screen monkey's boss fight and then just finish it up real fast since it's a main boss fight. After completing the boss fight, I just go to the Divine Child and then finally get my Immortal Blade. We are now entering chapter 5, and with that we need to get our hands on the last puzzle piece. As we've already picked up the shelter stone and the mortal blade, we only need the lotus flower now. The lotus flower is located at the end of Sunken Valley, so I start by making my way there. I simply swim through the water instead of walking on top of the bridge to avoid the first 3 samurai. I was a bit scared that in this next area it was gonna be very hard not to get spotted by all of the monkeys running around. Luckily it actually showed quite easy to traverse this path due to the large amount of tall grass. I simply took my time and avoided the monkeys by just walking around them in the tall grass. It can be quite hard to spot the monkeys because they're also hidden in the tall grass, but I simply just spammed the lock on button, and if I actually locked onto something in the tall grass, I just knew to avoid that monkey in there. Now I grab my last idol in Ashina Castle before heading straight towards the first idol of the Sunken Valley. Even in this first area it proves quite troublesome. Since I've already completed Miibu Village and Senpu Temple and I picked up the Shelter Stone first, in this area there now spawns these phantom zombie villagers underground. These are annoying, but they're not nearly as annoying as if I did Senpu Temple first and picked up the Mortal Blade first, because then that would spawn these Nachinata monks in the pathway coming up. And these would make this route almost impossible, I think. But for the zombie villagers, I just have to memorize the location of them and then simply jump around them not to trigger them. This passage through like the narrow cliff sides is actually quite straightforward. You simply just have to be patient with the snake eye spear bearers and then just wait for them to turn around before jumping in. The same is also true for when you get down to this open passage. Just be patient and then walk around them. They'll make the opportunity, not you. Now that we've grabbed the idol, we get into one of the worst sections of this run. Gunfort. I mean, Gunfort is the Achilles heel of this run. It's completely impossible, completely bonkers, completely and utterly not possible to complete. First off, if you don't use a Gatchin, the gunners will instantly detect you, no questions asked. And if you even get to just the middle pillar without getting spotted, there's a Snake Eyes mini-boss and she will instantly detect you if you don't use a Gatchin. There is a way to stealth death blow her or sneak past her with using a Gatchin, but it's not even possible to get to her with using a Gatchin anyways, as you get the first part done and then like 4 or 5 Gunfort people will just spot you anyways. So, that's it. Run's over. Run's dead. Can't get past it. Right? No. We're just gonna cheat again. And this time, we're not even gonna Airswim. This is why we needed to have Senpu completed beforehand. We need to get from Senpu all the way past this Gunfort. But how do we do that? Well, I'm gonna show you. First, we need to get some contact medicine. We can buy this from the shop at the abandoned dungeon entrance. We're gonna use the contact medicine to kill ourselves later on. After this, we want to travel back to the first idol of Senpu Temple. Here we're gonna have to equip the puppeteer ninjutsu we got from the monkey boss fight. I then make my way down to use the puppeteer ninjutsu on this rat right here to make him fly out the kite. I then have to sneak my way all the way up to and through the first building of Senpu with the same route I showed in chapter 4. I can now make my way to the top of the tree and use the kite from earlier as a grapple point jump. I can now make my way into the secret area of the Sunken Valley passage. This is the intended spot for killing the snake later on. But to prevent a sequence break, the developers made it so that the snake only spawns here after you've gone through Gunfort and went on top of the bridge to trigger the snake attacking you. It's here we're going to use the contact medicine to kill ourselves for an exploit. Normally you can't jump down without voiding out because you're falling too long, and if you jump on the stone pillar, you'll hit it so hard that you'll also void out. But I'm gonna jump up 2 times to set my HP low before using the contact medicine that will slowly start draining my HP. Right when I'm about to die, I'm gonna jump off aiming for the stone pillar. This will make me die in mid-air, which will make me land on the pillar without avoiding out. From here I can then resurrect. After resurrecting, I have to log out of the game and log back into the game. This will reset the height of the voiding area, making it beneath the surface of the water. This makes it so I can jump into the water without voiding out. After jumping into the water, I've successfully skipped the entire section of Gunfort. Another extremely beneficial aspect of this is that the snake still hasn't spawned in yet. This makes it so that I just can proceed through this area without worrying about getting detected by the snake. I can now simply proceed to swim through this area and grab my Riven Cave idol down here. For this next part, I just used trial and error. I went in and got spotted a bunch of times while slowly learning where and where not to go. I eventually found out that taking a lower path through the crevice before scaling up again, while being patient with the monkeys roaming around, was a really stealthy strategy. To be honest, I really didn't even know that this place with the Nightjar Ninjas existed, and it's actually a really great stealth section. Actually, to be honest, the entirety of this crevice is actually a really fun stealth section. And I could eventually grapple my way across to get to the idol before Guardian Ape. Guardian Ape himself is just another major boss we have to take down. I simply just used the general strategy of hitting him with the Mortal Blade paired with the Yashiriko Sugar for massive damage. This melts him through phase 1, and then phase 2 I simply just deflect him and hit him in his non-existing head thing. After defeating Guardian Ape, we can finally claim our prize for the last puzzle piece, the Lotus Flower. And we also get a very nice reward of his prosthetic Slender Finger. This prosthetic will prove extremely useful for the rest of the run. After collecting all 3 puzzle pieces, we've now finally transitioned the game into the next phase of Ashina Castle, the Invasion. This has not only disabled all of our idols in the entirety of Ashina Castle except the abandoned dungeon entrance, but it's also made Owl appear on top of Ashina Castle. I start by sneaking my way from the abandoned dungeon entrance to the idol in front of Ashina Castle. To do this, I have to cross this bridge. I thought getting past the red guard might be tricky, but it's actually really easy. He doesn't really look out for you because he's targeted on the samurai running in fear. After grabbing the closer idol, I can now focus my efforts on again scaling Ashina Castle. This time we're not limited to taking the right path around like last time, we have a few different options of getting up there. It is of course completely valid to try and take the Airswim route up there again. This is possible, but I just didn't want to do this because one of the rules I laid out was to limit the use of glitches and skips. And also the other solution is way cooler. After scaling the first part of Ashina Castle, we run directly into the major roadblock blocking us from progressing. The Lone Shadow. He's located extremely well and will instantly spot you if you get too close to him. For a long time I thought the solution was to try an edge grab and then slide along the edge and either try stealth killing him off the edge or just sneak past him by the edge. But as I tried, I really couldn't find any way to grab the edge without him A, spotting me, or B, me not being able to grab the edge at all. And as it stands, it's just not possible to sneak past. But this is why our new prosthetic is gonna be super clutch. I quickly traveled back to the dilapidated temple to talk to the sculptor to make him mount the Slender Finger into my prosthetic. The finger whistle is a prosthetic I can use to lure enemies' attention. In this scenario, I'm gonna use the finger whistle on the Lone Shadowsman. This will proc him to be suspicious and then come down to investigate the noise. He then leaves his post, and when he finds nothing, he proceeds to get back to his post. But by this time, I can then jump in and backstab him for the sweet silent kill. It is now important not to rush directly forward, as there are more Lone Shadowsmen located around the corner, and these will also instantly spot me. I instead have to make my way up, but to this grapple point. I from here have to perform a tricky parkour jump known as frontside dojo skip. This jump exploits a mechanic in the game, allowing me to turn in mid-air so I can jump off and back onto the roof. I from here simply walk into the cutscene trigger, triggering the cutscene with Owl. And if you wanted to end the game on Shura, this is it. The game is now officially possible to complete the Shura ending without getting detected. But we're not going for Shura ending. As I explained in the rules at the beginning of the video, we're going for the full Divine Severance. So come on Owl, let's take him on. As for Owl, he's really nothing special. I just keep Wing at him to keep up the pressure. And even though I haven't done any prayer necklaces or health upgrades, he still doesn't even one-shot me on some of his weaker moves. So he's actually kind of free. I really just play Owl mainly reactively, and there are only really 3 notable reactions I really look out for. That is when he does like the double hit firecracker move, you just spot dodge with shift through the firecracker. Or when he does the posture regain move, then I just throw single shuriken at him to make him stop. Or when he does like the double shuriken jump slash thing, then it's free to walk behind him and get some MD damage in. After I've defeated Owl, I can finally take my 3 ingredients to Kuro to advance the plot. Now, he burns the incense, and I finally get access to Fountainhead Palace, the last section of this run. I enter Fountainhead Palace through going into the tent located behind the Wedding Cave door and praying. After grabbing the first idol, we have to take out another main boss straight away. This time is the True Monk. Sadly, we're not able to do the same cheese as I did on the Corrupted Monk apparition again, so I just have to stick with the old-fashioned way. I mean, I think if you're like the reincarnation of Jesus Christ, you might be able to do some skipping on 1.06. But I mean, I'm not good enough for that. I know I said I couldn't do the same cheese as I did on the Corrupted Monk, but on True Monk there is actually a stealth death blow you can perform on the second phase of the boss fight, where you jump down and take out one of her life bars, and I did do that. Once I've defeated the True Monk, I now get access to the main part of Fountainhead Palace. My main objective at the moment is to sneak around the entirety of Fountainhead Palace to get up to the idol standing before the Okami leader Shisui. But as I'll discuss later, she might become a big controversy later on. The actual process of sneaking around Fountainhead Palace is actually really fun, and for this section, stealth really suits it. When it comes to the area of the dogs, I just chose to hog the wall and going around the right side. And when it comes to sneaking in the door without getting spotted, it's a really tight fit, and sometimes you might get spotted anyways. After sneaking around the dogs and grabbing the Mibu Mana idol, we get to one of the toughest sections of Fountainhead Palace. For the first Palace Noble, I have to wait around the corner to stealth deathblow him before I can proceed. The outside section of this took a long time, and many failed attempts to figure out a consistent path through this. First off, I have to wait for the noble on the bridge to turn around looking to the left before I can proceed. Then I sneak into this little house where I can sneak around this noble before killing him and grappling into the roof. I then cross this small section and just wait for the enemies to pass before jumping down. Now we get to the worst area of this section. I have to get through this door, but there's not only a noble looking out through the door, but also a noble on the other side of the door looking inwards. And there's another Okami enemy overlooking them both. This is right at the end of the section, and my strategy for getting past them is really finicky. First, I stand still, barely inside his vision range, to make the Okami spearbearer suspicious. Once he's lured to my position, I then go into the tall grass on the right and pop a Gachin. And you have to be careful, in this tall grass your camera easily gets completely fucked. After he's crushed you, you have to instantly go behind him and backstab him. This is really dangerous without a Gachian, which is why I chose to use one. Again, using the power of the Gachian, I snuck behind the first noble, killing him. For the second noble, I chose to hug the wall near the door and then use my prosthetic finger whistle to lure him in. For some reason, he almost instantly lost complete interest in the finger whistle lure, so I just jumped the gun and took my chance to get in and stab him in the back before I got the chance to turn around again. And then I can grab my idol and finish this section. This is our first interaction with the Great Colored Carp, and as laid out in the rules, we are not allowed to get spotted by the Great Colored Carp. Fortunately, he won't detect us just by us tiptoeing forward and triggering him to destroy the bridge. But in all honesty, after last section, this section is not that difficult at all. This area simply has way more verticality and a lot more grapple points, making it easier to stealth past a lot of the enemies. The enemies that are here are also just less frequent and less annoying. The only real annoying part was when I got to this staircase going downwards. I knew rushing down the staircase would trigger 2 Okami warriors to come towards me and then instantly spot me. So I thought that I had to trigger them from distance so they wouldn't spot me, and then I'll just wait for them to move so I can sneak past them freely. But as it turns out, once you trigger these, they just run out and then completely gatekeep the entire area, making it very difficult to traverse past them. The solution that ended up working was actually just contradicting my original thought process. Instead of triggering them from distance and playing the patience game, it was actually better to rush ahead and break off to the right path. This means I could get past them before they ran out, while also not running into them. And even though this area with all the enemies looks tough to sneak past, it's actually really simple. But now, it's gonna be a bit of a debate. We're now coming into the Okami leader Shizu fight, and as I hinted at earlier, she might spring a bit of a debate. The thing about the Okami leader is that on a technical level, she's 100% a mini-boss, no doubt about it. But as a real mandatory mini-boss, all of them up to this point has had a smoke wall attached to them, and with an exception of the armored warrior, all have also had multiple death blows, meaning it was possible to stealth death blow the first health bar. But the Okami leader is not attached to a smoke wall. Instead, she has this mechanic where if you go into the water at any point before beating her, she will ram down lightning into the water, killing you. This works because in order to progress you have to dive down into the water and go through the cave with the Great Colored Carp. You could actually make a really strong argument for killing the Okami leader if you had the opportunity to stealth deathblow her one and only health bar, as this of course would result in her never detecting you. But it is impossible to sneak up on her. This is because of the way she's programmed to always look at you and fire at you even without detecting you. What's even worse is that she doesn't even really detect you. You just kinda walk into her range and then she starts firing bolts of lightning at you and kicks her stupid ball. And there just isn't really a perfect solution to this problem. Because if we just simply focus on the definition I presented in the beginning of the video, then she doesn't detect me at all, technically. So this means I can simply just walk up and kill her, right? But no. I really wouldn't allow myself to do this because it just felt extremely wrong. I mean, she's shooting at me, she's fighting me, and her life bar is on the top left completed and we're engaged in a battle. And I know it's possible to technically just skip her, because the requirement is actually just kind of a soft requirement. Since she isn't attached to a smoke wall and just shoots lightning at you as her preventative measure, it's actually more than possible with a decent path to just tank some of the hits and then have terrain block the rest. And you are actually able to do this right after beating the monk at the start of Fountainhead Palace. But that would just also feel a bit cheap since you're like skipping 2/3 of the Fountainhead Palace. So at the end I simply just had to stick with my rules. She's not allowed to be killed, she's a mini-boss and she's not attached to a smoke wall, and there's no point in really denying anything after that. and she also does not detect me. There is no yellow arrow, there's no red arrow, there's no sound, there's no nothing. And if you so choose to do so, it is completely legal to, at the complete start of Fountainhead Palace, immediately dive into the water and take a specific path around, skipping 2/3 of Fountainhead Palace if you so wish to do so. But I also put in the rules that there were bonus points for limiting skips that were unnecessary. So I will simply take the bonus point here in saying I completed Fountainhead Palace up until this idol, and from this idol onwards, I would simply just skip the Okame leader and swim directly into the cave with the fish. I think this is a solution where on paper I don't break any rules, which at the end of the day is fine by me. For the path I ended up using, I really didn't develop the strategy too much. Mainly, I simply just jump beneath the tree, having the big log she's standing on block her lightning while I'm standing under the log. This mainly just helped me time just when she fires her lightning off, so I can quickly swim and get a head start before she gets ready to fire her next lightning bolt at me. And then sometimes you just get hit and sometimes you don't, so it's just really nice to have a revive ready for when she hits you or when she doesn't hit you. When I get into the cave of the Great Carp, I immediately take the right path. That's because the first hiding spot of the left passage is actually not safe from her lightning bolt while the rest of them are. The Great Carp itself is also a little inconsistent, I feel. This might be because I haven't spent too much time with him to really figure out how his AI works yet, but for me it just felt like sometimes he spotted me where I really thought he wouldn't spot me, and sometimes he didn't spot me where I really thought he would spot me. But all of that really didn't matter too much, since I eventually got through this section completely undetected. Which means I can now grab the final idol and get ready for the last section of Fountainhead Palace. First off, the room directly after the idol is completely filled with these red-cloaked palace nobles. But I came up with a kinda clever solution to get rid of them. Instead of trying to sneak through this area, I instead hugged the wall and opened the door before heading back to the idol and resting. Opening the door will then activate the old woman to come in and kill every one of the palace nobles, so I don't have to get rid of them myself. This completely clears the room of the nobles, also on subsequent reloads, which is very nice and extremely convenient. And now, the only thing that stands between Wolf and the Divine Dragon is this staircase. But holy crap, as a last roadblock, this staircase did not mess around. Okay, let's start from the top. This staircase is guarded by 3 enemies, all of them some type of Okame enemy, and all overlook the 90-degree right turn of the staircase. 2 of them sit in the back and look down the staircase, and the last one is pseudo roaming. And I say pseudo roaming because this last Okame enemy is buggy as hell. First off, homie is a complete menace. He instantly spots you if you get any kind of line of sight with him, and it's very clear that the devs did not want you to sneak past him or stealth kill him. I saw him roaming and decided to give it a reset just to find out his pathing. And then I saw him spawn in the corner. Then he moved a bit out of the corner and then jumped up to the staircase. And then he started spinning in complete f***ing circles. He does this every time. This 360ing paired with his crazy insta-spot mechanics makes it so it's impossible to get up above a certain point because he will just instantly spot you. And there's no quote-unquote behind him to stay out of line of sight. There are some grapple points up where the buggy enemy is roaming, but all of these are complete red herrings and will just buy you a free insta-detect. So the second strategy I tried involved getting one of the back enemies suspicious while hugging the cliff at which the buggy guard was standing atop of to stay out of line of sight. Then once the back enemy was suspicious, I would walk back and try to take him out silently. But this never worked, since the back enemy would just lose interest way too quickly and would never be in a position where you could take him out without getting spotted by Mr. Buggy. Then I came up with a clever strategy. I knew the only time he would look away from me was when he was about to jump up the staircase. So I thought I would try and pop a Gatchin and wait for him to turn around and jump. Then I would make my move and grapple to the upper platform. But homie had other plans and even spotted me with Gatchin enabled in mid-air while looking away. I then decided to shift my focus for a bit and tried to make it lift around the cliffside instead. I knew I couldn't go straight up the staircase, but I thought I could maybe do like a delayed jump around the left side and make it to a grapple point, and from there I could maybe sneak around the other back 2 enemies, who were a little more normal in the sense of insta-spotting people. But I quickly ruled out this plan, as there was just no realistic way of making it around the left side of the cliff. But then, when I was almost out of ideas, the stars aligned. I snuck up the staircase, staying close to the cliffside to stay out of LOS. Then did an untargeted finger whistle to get the attention of as many enemies as possible, then went back and waited. And I got the attention of one of the back enemies and Mr. Buggy. My original plan was to kill Mr. Buggy, but when I realized how far down they went, I jumped at the chance and rushed around the right cliffside to the now unattended grapple point and grappled up. From here, I could sneak up the staircase without the last enemy spotting me. And I could grab the last idol of Fountainhead Palace. I was so happy to finally be able to make it to the altar and pray to enter the Divine Dragon fight. Because I knew that now I had made it over the last roadblock. And there was no stopping this run now. Especially not Divine Dragon. Since Divine Dragon is just another main mandatory boss fight, it is not concluded by the rules of this game, and it's so good to finally be able to just smack some booty without being restricted. As I fire the last lightning bolt into the Divine Dragon, knocking it down, I walk up to it and insert my mortal blade and retrieve my gracious gift of tears. As I said before, that was the last roadblock, and henceforth, the run. From here, Ashina Castle has stepped into phase 3 and it's now burning. But in accordance with our story, Wolf is still unknown, so let's keep it that way. After receiving the secret passage key from Emma, we can now go out the window and head for the secret passage. I take the route shown here from rooftop to rooftop, as it ensures that I don't get detected. When arriving at the location of the 7-spear mini-boss in Ashina Reservoir, it was kinda surprising, but you can actually pretty easily sneak past them without getting caught. And from here, it's a straight shot to the secret passage. And now, in all honesty, the challenge part of this run is basically over. We've made it to Ish undetected. So I would like to take this opportunity to talk final thoughts while you guys get to watch the last boss fight. I know this run had a lot of arbitrary rules, and I know you can actually do a lot of the stuff I did, but better. For example, you can skip the monkey boss fight entirely by performing an extremely precise delayed jump into the sacred chamber. But to be frank, I'm just not good enough to do this. And in extension, it's also probably best to completely skip the armored warrior with an Airswim, which is also possible. And I know it's also possible to do another Airswim straight into Fountainhead and Divine Dragon and skip like the entire run. But that would kind of have defeated the purpose of this run. This run was more in spirit of, holy shit, you can do like 90% of Sekiro overworld without getting detected, and cheese and skip the remaining 10% with glitches. And I think doing it like I did with my rules was in spirit of the game, and it was to breathe new perspective into the game. And plus, I made the rules, so go me. This run was completed on the 19th of August 2023. So this editing took me a solid month to complete and well over 50 hours in blood, sweat and tears. So I'd really like to thank you for watching. And if you want to ask any questions or tell me how stupid I am for not doing A and B way, you can leave a comment. And I'll respond to every comment I can. For the record, I would like to go out saying that I haven't found any other runs on YouTube at least during the entire game of Sekiro undetected. But to be frank, I haven't really looked that hard for it, so there might be something out there along the lines, I'm not sure. As for the run itself, I really enjoyed it. I would really recommend it to anyone wanting to try a different experience in Sekiro. It really makes you think in a different way and makes you traverse and plan the game a lot differently than you otherwise would. Which for me is what I have been aching for, since it's one of my favorite games and I've already completed it several times on Demon Build, Charmless, New Game Plus 7 and done complete overhaul mods like Sekiro Resurrection. But again, I really can't thank you enough if you made it through this entire video. It really does make it feel like it was worth the work. And I know it's not good to self-criticize, but I have this annoying feeling that I would have made the first couple of chapters different and maybe a little shorter, but I just have to release this, since otherwise it would never see the light of day. But I guess I'll finish this video by answering the question I sought out to find the answer for. Is it possible to beat Sekiro Shadows Die Twice without getting detected? Yes, it certainly is.
Sekiro.